What follows is a sermon that I delivered on a Friday night at a Sabbath service. Please note, the recording was not made on the Sabbath. Shalom, my friends. Earlier in the week, I thought my sermon was all set, and I made myself some notes that I could study during the week, and then I was prepared to come in last Friday night. This is a recording of a Friday night sermon being made after the Sabbath. I like to talk without notes, and that means I have to prepare. It's harder to talk without notes than it is to use a prepared text. My videos always use a prepared text, but not this one. So I ask you to bear with me. The sermon I planned, I did end up giving, but as the week went on, more and more things got added in. And so I'm going to begin with three things that were not a part of the original sermon I planned. I should tell you, this was a sermon for a Sabbath we designated in honor of the veterans in our congregation, and it was delivered on November 11th, the day after the birthday of the United States Marine Corps. So what was it that I added to the sermon? First of all, I shouldn't be shocked by this anymore. But I have no words. I continue to be dismayed every time I read about the actions of the United Nations, be it the Human Rights Council, or in this case, the General Assembly, since the October 7 massacre by the Hamas terrorists of innocent Israelis, civilians. The United Nations has condemned Israel 8 times. The General Assembly has issued 8 condemnations of Israel. How many for the rest of the world put together? 0. Think about that. Israel is attacked by terrorists. I won't go into the details of the atrocities. They're horrific, but you know what they are. And Israel gets condemned 8 times. Hamas does not. In 1961, John F. Kennedy, in his inaugural address, warned of the danger of the United Nations becoming, quote, a forum for invective. He was all too prophetic. That's all it is. I also wanted to talk a little bit about a letter. And there's a backstory to this. In 2021, some young rabbis and rabbinical students in the conservative movement, that's the movement to which I belong, wrote a letter, like the UN, condemning Israel, calling it an apartheid state, leveling all sorts of accusations against Israel. I have a colleague and a friend. We are all members of a group called the Rabbinical Assembly. And I'm very, very proud to be a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. Because I went to a different rabbinical school, I was not automatically admitted into the assembly. I had to apply for membership. When I applied, I was told that it cost a fair amount of money to apply, that there are usually 30 to 40 applicants, and they'll take maybe 3 or 4. I applied anyway. I literally spent 3 full years preparing for my interview, which I was fortunate enough to get. That's not automatic either. And on Friday night, I described to my congregation some of the requirements one had to fulfill at the interview. I won't go into those details now. They probably wouldn't be of interest. But suffice it to say that because I worked so hard to become a member of the Rabbinical Assembly, it is a source of great pride for me. And I was appalled in 2021 when members and future members of the Assembly repeated the very lies about Israel that Israel's worst enemies like to repeat. So I mentioned a friend of mine in the Rabbinical Assembly. He and another fellow, I'm friendly with him via email, but not personally. They recently wrote a letter. And this letter not only condemned what the younger colleagues and students had done in 2021, but addressed the anti-Israel tropes and called on the two conservative seminaries to be more careful in vetting their students, who they are admitting, who they are ordaining. We should not be creating a generation of rabbis who believe that Israel is an apartheid state. I saw this letter online. I immediately signed it. Then I got a call from my friend who was one of the authors. He didn't realize I had already signed, and I told him, I'm already on board, no problem. Then I got a call from another colleague telling me how courageous I was for signing it. And I said, well, what do you mean? What's courageous about it? It's just the truth. And he said that he was a Zionist, but that he couldn't sign it. And I asked him why, and his answer was he was afraid for his job. He was afraid his congregation would not renew his contract if he signed this letter backing the state of Israel. So this made me curious, and I went online knowing that this had been distributed electronically to hundreds of conservative rabbis, probably 700 or 800. And I was stunned to see that there were 20 signatories, including the two who originally wrote the letter. I was never ashamed to be part of my rabbinical association. But 20 signers, 20 rabbis standing up for Israel. I know. I have a lot of colleagues who believe in what that letter said. And I can't judge someone who has to put bread on his table and a roof over her family's head. But is this what's happening in our Jewish community? I said one thing to my congregation when I was interviewed in 2010 for this pulpit. I said, I keep politics off the pulpit, but I will always advocate for Israel. I am a Zionist. And thank God my congregation wanted a rabbi who was a Zionist and would always advocate for Israel. And now I thank God that I don't have to worry how my congregation will respond to my signing a letter that speaks the truth about Israel. Then came the third thing, which will lead me into what was going to be my sermon. And on one hand, it's a very good thing. Columbia University voted to de-charter, if that's the proper term, revoke the charters of two notoriously anti-Israel organizations. SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. The names always sound great, right? These organizations pick names. Who wouldn't be for justice? But they're not about justice for Palestine. They're about eliminating Israel. And the other group that lost its charter was the Jewish Voice for Peace. The Jewish Voice for Peace is an anti-Israel organization. They do not speak for the Jewish community. They are not part of the mainstream Jewish community. They perpetrate lies against Israel. They deserve to have their charter revoked, and I'm glad they did. But here's what kills me. My very best friend from rabbinical school, someone I loved as a brother, founded the rabbinic cabinet of Jewish Voice for Peace. And it has completely destroyed our friendship. It's one thing to disagree on something like politics, and I'll mention that again in a minute. But when your values are so incompatible with another person's values, your most deeply held core beliefs, it's difficult, if not impossible, to maintain a relationship. And I lost a dear friend. So let me tell you what I plan to talk to my congregation about. It has to do with Facebook. And I'm sure most of you know what Facebook is. If you don't, I'll just briefly explain that it's an online platform that allows people to connect to one another. The act of connecting to another person on Facebook is called friending the person. And it's a little bit of a loose use of the word friend. I have 1,100 Facebook friends. So some of them are dear friends with whom I grew up, but we live in different parts of the country. And some of them are people I've never met and never will meet, but we have a common interest. I like Fuji cameras. There's a Fuji camera user group on Facebook. Some of those members are my Facebook friends. Runs the gamut. I just put a post on my Facebook page that said the following: if you do not unequivocally condemn the October 7th Hamas massacre, please unfriend me. Anything we once had in common is now irrelevant. And I meant every word of it. Unfriending someone on Facebook is exactly what it sounds like. You take someone who was once a Facebook friend, you cancel the friendship. I remember not long ago, people were doing it over who someone voted for President of the United States, or who they didn't vote for President of the United States. And if you voted a certain way or you didn't vote a certain way, people were unfriending you. People were being unfriended left and right. I thought it was kind of silly. But when it comes to this, if you cannot say, no matter what your quarrels are with the present Israeli government or any issue that the state of Israel has, and I don't claim it to be a perfect state, nor do I claim America to be perfect. The perfect nation has yet to be founded. So you can have whatever arguments you want against Israel, except challenging its right to exist. But if you cannot say that despite any disagreement I have with the Netanyahu government, I condemn the slaughter of children and women and men, people, human beings. I condemn that slaughter. If you can't say that, you don't hate evil. You support it. And if you support evil, I have nothing in common with you. Nothing that means anything at all. So I asked those who could not make that statement to unfriend me. The theme that ties all of these things together is values. The United Nations is morally bankrupt, condemning the only liberal democracy in the Middle East 8 times, and not condemning any other nation on earth even once in the same time period. Not being able to condemn the October 7th massacre is also a values issue. I can be friends with people of every political persuasion. I am. But if you don't condemn evil, no, that's too much. We cannot be friends. We have nothing relevant in common. As this was a Veterans Day sermon, I concluded it at this point with a prayer for those who have and those who currently defend our rights in the United States of America. I pointed out that if you are a first or second generation American, you were born in the United States of America, not in Tsarist Russia, for example, as my grandfather was. You're one of the luckiest generations on earth. This is not to slight other democratic nations. But we've got an awful lot of hyphenated Americans. This American, that American, the other American. I'm Jewish, but I'm an American. And I'm proud to call myself an American. And I thank God for those who risk their lives to ensure that the rest of us have the true blessings of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Be well. My friends, as always, you can subscribe to the channel by clicking on my face, which appears over there, or watch the last video I released by clicking on its icon right over there.